Hello everyone, welcome to Skill Dev. Trey here, and in this lesson, we're going to build a pub sub and learn about event-driven programming. Event-driven programming is a fundamental and very important topic in computer science. The power of it enables us to build scalable and complex software systems. And when I say event-driven programming in this lesson, I'm broadly referring to it as any pattern or implementation that uses an event emitter that pushes events, and then there are event listeners that look for a specific event name, take in the data from that event, and then execute an associated callback function. Some of the most notable or important patterns and implementations that fall under this are one, a pub sub, which is what we're going to build in this lesson, the observer pattern, an event bus, message queues, or any event-driven architecture. And there are likely many more, but I think these are the most notable and recognizable. And when it comes to interviews, the two that I see come up the most often are an event bus and the pub sub. And when I say an event, we can very simply think of it as a JavaScript object. So this object is an event. The event is going to have some name, and listeners are going to look for this name and know when to execute their callback functions. And there will also be an associated payload of data with an event. So an example of an event is you can think of a key up event in JavaScript. So when the user presses a key, the browser is going to emit this event. So it's going to send it to the key up name, and the payload of data can be anything associated with that key up. For example, the key pressed, the value of the input where the key occurred, or the text in that input, the target DOM node itself, and just anything else associated with the event. So in this case, the browser is the event emitter, and in our code, we can listen for the event by calling an addEventListener for the key up event, and then we pass it a callback that will execute a function with the data passed along with the event. So as I said, event-driven programming is fundamental to computer science, but it's really the foundation of JavaScript programming. We've already discussed browser events. Node itself is also based on events, so on your server, you can send and listen for events at any point. But in addition to that, we use these patterns within our code as well. So many modern state management libraries use some form of event-driven programming, or the observer pattern, or a pub sub. Like with Redux, we have these actions, and there's an action name and a payload associated with that action. And then with reactive programming, this is really the core concept. So with RxJS and other event libraries, what they allow us to do is to create events and listen to events within our code. We can also think of messaging and message queues as events. And then GraphQL subscriptions. You can subscribe to event updates within your database. And these are just some of the many implementations of event-driven programming in JavaScript. So to visualize it and put this more in terms of our pub sub, we have these publishers that send events. The event will have a name and a payload. And then we have subscribers that listen for the events, and if they see the event name they're subscribed to, they execute a callback with the event data. So we can have many publishers and many subscribers. So the prompt for this question very simply states, implement a pub sub class. We're going to maintain a list of subscribers, so subscribers that are listening to specific event names. And we'll have a subscribe method. So this is how you create new subscribers. You pass in the event name that you want to listen for, and then the callback that you want to execute when that event occurs. So the callback is going to take in the data, and this callback can be anything you want. It's just going to be a function that you define to run when we see an event name. We're going to write a publish method that will trigger when an event occurs. So we call publish with the event name, and then we send it the data associated with this event. When we call publish, the subscribers listening for this event name will execute their callback. And finally, we'll have an unsubscribe method. We pass it the event name, and then it will look for the callback associated with this event and remove it. So then this callback will no longer execute. It will be removed from the subscribers. So the way the PubSub will function, you create a new PubSub object from the PubSub class. Then you can subscribe to events. So we can just think of this like an on-click event. So with our PubSub, we get to define the event names that we're listening for. And these can be any names. In this case, I'm just picking common names associated with JavaScript that you may know. So we're subscribing to a click. We have a callback that will execute anytime we publish a click. I'm also creating an error event. And notice I've subscribed twice. So we should be able to have many subscribers for the same event name that execute different callbacks. And then once again, we can publish to the same channel or event name. And then both of these subscribers will execute their callback with the same data. And now we're ready to implement our PubSub. We have the same PubSub shell we were given in the prompt, and we're going to test it against the same publish and subscribe methods. We're going to subscribe to one click event and then publish to that click event. We're going to create 2 error subscriptions and then publish to that, and we should see an error 1 and error 2. So to start, we actually don't need to make any changes to the constructor. We're given this subscribers object, and this is where we're going to store our subscribers when we call the subscribe method. So let's implement that now. So first, we're just checking if an event name exists in the subscribers object yet. So initially, the subscribers object is empty, and we're just going to add events as we recognize them or as they appear in the code. If we are seeing an event name for the first time, in the subscribers object, we're creating a new event name array. So we set the key as the event name and the value as an empty array. And the reason we're using arrays, we can have many events for any given event name. Like for the error function, we're subscribing 2. So to handle multiple events, each event name will have an array that can hold as many items as we want. Then we just push the callback to that event name's array. And this is all we need to do to subscribe. And I think this is a very important point. When people think about event-driven programming, I think it becomes more complex than it actually is. But we're only using data structures we already know. So there's nothing crazy or magic happening behind the scenes. When we have a subscriber, we simply add its callback function to an array. And this is all we mean by listening. It's now registered to this event because it's in this event's array. We again just check if the event name exists in the subscribers yet. If it doesn't exist, then we know nothing is subscribed to this event, so there aren't any callbacks to execute. If this is the case, we can simply return. There's nothing to do when we try to publish this event. So when we say we're publishing an event, all we're doing is accessing the subscribers for that event name. They're stored in an array. We iterate through each subscriber. We grab the callback that we stored. and then we execute that callback with the data. And this is all we mean by publishing an event. We're simply iterating through all the items we had stored, which we say are listening to this event, and then we execute their callback with this event's data. So once again, no magic happening, nothing crazy happening behind the scenes. To emit an event or publish an event, we're simply iterating through an array and executing functions which are simply the items in the array. And then finally, to unsubscribe, we again check if this event exists in the subscribers. If we do have an event, then we simply go through the array and filter out the callback that we want to unsubscribe. And that's all we need to do to remove a subscription. And that's the entire PubSub implementation. We run the test. We see that we were successfully able to subscribe to events and then publish to that event channel or the event name and execute our callbacks. So the core of the PubSub is simply managing the subscriptions in an object where the key is the event name, and then the value is an array where we just store the callback functions. When we publish, we just access that object by key name and then execute all the callbacks in that array. And that's the core fundamentals of the PubSub. That's how we're listening to events or pushing these events from a publisher and then receiving them in the correct subscriber. Thanks everyone, and I'll see you in the next lesson.